Hey guys, in this video, I'm going to be talking about the best change that comes in Wrath of the Lich King. And a change that I think a lot of people in the community and a lot of players coming over from TBC into Wrath are not adapting to very well. They're not adjusting very well. And so we're going to talk about that. But first, a little shout out to my Twitch in the description below. And also subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to support me. Thank you. And let's get into the video. So TBC compositions were incredibly restrictive, and in Wrath, that goes away. We have so much flexibility. We have this great site, I'll link in the description, that helps us plan out our raid buffs, but they're really easy to get. It's not very hard to get every single raid buff, and typically a lot of classes can cover multiple raid buffs. We also have the introduction of classes no longer being kind of support classes. So take Shadow Priest. Shadow Priest was kind of like a pure support class in TBC. They really did not do very good damage at all. We'll come into Wrath, this 3% spell hit. You can get it from a Boomkin. The mana regeneration, which was kind of their go-to, can be covered by a survival or a ret. And that leaves them with kind of very little utility. Some buffs that other priests could just bring. Your Disc Priest can bring these buffs. And then at Vampiric Embrace and a Hymn. So you're kind of the amount of utility is not nearly what it was in TBC. But that's a good thing because now the Shadow Priest is balanced to not just be this utility bot, and it actually is balanced as a damage dealer, and they actually can do decent damage. And that's what you're going to see across all of the classes. There's no longer these classes that are just pure utility bots that just do no damage. Every class in Wrath is balanced. Now, it's not perfect balance, but it's much better than TBC damage number wise, what you're going to be able to do on a damage meter. It's so much better than it was in TBC, and you're able to have a ton of flexibility in your composition. So that is the first thing to think about is there's no longer just these utility classes, and you've got a lot of flexibility. So now, as I am putting together kind of like a cookie cutter comp here, you're going to see a lot of people. I think this is a very popular video Rugs made, featured a comp like this too. I think this is considered one of the more common compositions, but put together kind of a basic composition that a lot of guilds might run. And take it from there. We're going to make some adjustments to the comp and, change how there's a few different things you can change basically based on your guild. So we've got a demo, and then we want 3. Yeah, so that's our tank and our DPS, and then our healers run kind of a combo of healers there. So this is a pretty popular composition. You're going to see something like this a lot. But let's talk about the flexibility you have in this comp and talk about kind of just the way you should look at building a comp in general. Now, I just put this comp together, but when creating my guild's roster for Wrath, and whenever I'm making any planning about Wrath the Lich King, I am not looking at this composition. This is not something I am building off of. And I would not necessarily recommend in your guild that you just copy the meta comp and try and have your guild shift to it, because it's not really something that is necessary at all. Take, for example, let's say there's someone in your guild that wants to play something like an elemental shaman. Right now, the Wrath meta and the meta gamers and the tier lists, a lot of them are going to say, well, try and get that LE to reroll, or it doesn't fit into the comp, or you don't necessarily need it. And they're already immediately, trying to stick to a cold, structured composition. And a lot of content creators do this too, where they're, and it's no malicious intent, but what they're thinking about is they're thinking about rating, and they're thinking about high level, right? Trying to be the best guild in the world, trying to speedrun, trying to be number 1, and everything being optimal. And so in their head, they're saying, okay, you've got your 1 rep. You've got your 1 DPS warrior. You've got your 1 boomkin. You've got your 1 shadow priest. You got your one feral cat, and it just kind of is second nature to a lot of the content creators that are used to being in hyper optimized guilds. Is they just throw out these number restrictions on the number of classes you can play. But if you ask them and said, "Hey, average Joe guild here, would it be all right if we ran two rets?" They'd say, "Of course, it's fine to play two ret. Wrath the Lich King has much better balance. Of course, you can play two ret." It's just when they're making a composition, it's all about ideal. It's all about BIS. It's all about being exactly optimal. But the difference between running, you know, drop a hunter, pop in a ret, this is going to be a better comp for a lot of guilds that have two good rets and they don't have two hunters that want to play, right? There's so many tweaks you can go here. You don't necessarily need four warlocks. Maybe you've got another mage that's a pumper. You're going to actually be improving your guild by making the comp worse in Wrath when you have people on their comfort picks. And I know that sounds crazy. And that's not something you're going to hear a lot because a lot of people are assuming that you're in a serious guild and everyone is willing to re-roll, respec, and play the classes to a high degree. But in your average guild, in your typical guild, it's just the reality is, you might not have two people that want to play Frost. That's fine. Crack out a double unholy. No big deal. Try and fill the gap. Try and make sure you have your, a nice buff that is covered by the enhancement shaman, the attack speed, the melee haste, this one here. Try and cover that so you can, if you don't have a Frost, make sure you get it through your enhance. If you are running an arms warrior, like a big talk right now is warrior, and that you can't run warriors. I'm just telling you right now, a lot of comps are going to lean melee heavy because melee are popular, right? It is perfectly fine to run a couple warriors, a couple rets, a couple rogues. It's perfectly fine, especially if you're rogue heavy, because rogues are really strong the whole game, or Death Knight heavy, they're really strong the whole game. Again, look, we still have all the buffs. The world did not explode when we put 2 ret, 2 DPS warrior into our raid, right? Everything is still fine. And you don't necessarily need to have double holy paladin. You could play something like a holy priest. You could play double resto druid. You can play healers that are not necessarily the best combo and still get away with it when you have people that are playing classes that they're comfortable on. And that's the one thing that I would say, and this is how I would build a composition in Wrath the Lich King. You get people's comfort picks, you put people on the classes they want to play, and then you deal with the buff situation. So let's say we didn't have a boomkin here. If we didn't have a boomkin, I'm saying, all right, I would like to find some source of the 5% spell group. I want the buffs in our 25-man raid. They're easy enough to get. I want to try and get all of them, especially the important ones. So this last slot, I want an Ellie or I want a balance. I don't care which. I'm going to try and get all of the different raid buffs that I can get in a composition. And then from there, everyone's on their comfort picks. Everyone plays what they want. You want to make sure you have enough tanks and healers, obviously. And then you want to look at loot. Loot and a basic melee ranged distribution. If you end up running 10 melee 8 range, 11 melee 7 range, you'll probably be fine. If you're running I wouldn't go too crazy with the split. If you run something like this, 13 melee 5 range, and you're not like split running or you don't have a very specific reason, I'd be a little concerned about some ranged fights. And I would be a little bit concerned with lack of warlocks on specific fights. I know Yogg Saron is a big warlock fight. That this comp might not be something your everyday guild is going to want to try and pilot when it's this slanted towards melee. But if you're running something that is going to have, a reasonable split of melee and range, if you're running something that is going to have a reasonable amount of people competing for two-handed weapons, I'd say be a little bit careful. If your comp is like 3 Fury Warrior, 2 Ret, 2 Unholy, and your Unholies want to play two-hander, not one-hander, That's a lot of people competing for two-handed weapons, but that's how I would build a comp in Wrath the Lich King. Do not worry so much about the exact setup, the exact mismatch, and I wouldn't even worry too much about your 10 mans being super optimized. Try and split up your 10 mans. You can use alts to cover any holes in your 10 mans, um, but you're not going to have everybody always making all the 10 mans, especially if you have them on different days from your normal raids. And I would just say, in Wrath, oh man, is it wonderful that you have so much flexibility in your raid comp. It's so nice. Don't let it go to waste. Don't don't be so rigid with your comps. I already am hearing guilds trying to adhere to the exact meta comp, trying to follow it to a T, forcing people to reroll off of perfectly viable classes that are going to be just fine. Like take for example, if I know someone who's really good at mage, right? And let's say we have 3 warlocks, and I would prefer to have 4 warlock, but we're instead going to have, like, let's say this is our comp. Let's say we've got 3 mage, 3 warlock, right? 3 mage, 3 warlock. Now, a lot of guides and lists and everything, they want 4 warlock, 2 mage, or even more warlock than mage than that, 5 and 1 or something. I'm telling you right now, I'm going with the 3 mage, 3 warlock every day of the week if the person wants to play mage, because they're less likely to quit. They're more likely to keep a guild in the gear. They're more likely to, first of all, not just reroll, but they're more likely to quit the game if you're forcing them onto something they don't want to play, or even pressuring them onto something they don't want to play. If they're having more fun playing their character, they're going to pursue more out of raid upgrades. They're going to take their character more seriously, and they're going to do more damage on the thing they're comfortable with, the thing they want to play, more than the meta class. That, again, in Wrath, the meta difference is so much smaller. It's so much smaller. It's not even it's not even like a major sacrifice to have someone on their comfort pick over what you think is the absolute meta. So I would say that this is the meta. The meta of Wrath is have at least 5 healers depending on the fight. 4 to 6. You can cut down a bunch of healers to specific fights, of course. Make sure you've got your tanks and some designated off tanks to cover if a tank is missing, or if you need additional tanks on a fight. And then from there, just try and get the buffs and try and get people on what they want to play, and watch loot. Just make sure loot is not too competitive between some classes. And that's it. You're done. It's that easy. It's that easy. And I know some of you watching this might be like, hey man, he's really underselling, the difference between, a shadow priest versus affliction, single target, this, yada. The reality is that may be, accurate at the highest of levels where everyone's playing equally. But that's not how normal guilds work. That's not how 95% of guilds work. In 95% of guilds, there is a massive disparity in the guild between the skill of the players. And you want to go with the best players. In Wrath, you bring the player, not the class. And you want to bring the players that you can trust to do mechanics. You want to bring the players that are not going to die, and they're going to be the ones that do more damage. So I would heavily recommend let people play what they want. Try and make the comp work around what people want to play. And absolutely do not like kick your second red or force them to re-roll onto something they don't want to play, or unless your guild is trying to be the best speedrunning guild in the world, unless your guild is trying actively, like really seriously trying to get like world firsts and speedrunning records, and unless you're at that level of seriousness, even a guild that just trying to parse, even just a guild trying to do well, you want people on their comfort picks. And Wrath has a lot more room for individual skill than TBC. You're going to see a lot of difference between the good players and the bad players in your raid. You're going to see big gaps between, and it doesn't go for every class. Like the assassination rogue is pretty easy to play. Let's be honest. You're not going to see major gaps between your assassination rogues DPS rotation. But as mechanics get harder, the weaker players are going to die more. They're not going to do as much damage when you need them most. And then the classes that have more play to them, classes like Affliction, classes like Enhancement Shaman, you're going to actually see, because of the increase in difficulty in some of the rotations in Wrath, you're going to start seeing the better players are gonna come to the top, and regardless of spec, regardless of class, your better players are gonna be towards the top of the meter. Uh, so yeah, that's pretty much it. Don't don't get too overzealous, forcing your furies and all that stuff to reroll, and yeah, just appreciate that in Wrath of the Lich King we got some great balance, and it's way better. All right, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.